Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. I'm now way more brave, and I hope to reduce the gap between clicking the go live button and actually starting to talk, because the gap is quite large and I don't want too much dead space in my videos. But now I have a lot of rambling in my videos. This is a big one because this is a culmination of years of anticipation, appreciation to a very, very cool dude. Shout out to Riley Testude, who enables basically this entire video even to exist in the first place. Shout out to all the people watching. I know I usually wait with that for a little bit, but we have a couple of more people watching than usual. Please consider liking, subscribing, sharing, commenting, all the YouTube jazz, as I call it. We have Angelica there, Kesha, we have Ifat. So if you want to participate, I'm fully open to hearing your thoughts. Please let me know what you think. We're so close to 100K. Let's get it done until like May or something. I'm super duper excited, as you might hear from my voice. And if you really enjoy the content and you really want to support this channel, please consider leaving a super chat or a super sticker with a small donation, or feel free to subscribe to my Patreon, and we'll talk a little bit more, not about my Patreon, but Patreon in general, a little bit later down the video. But at first, cheers. I always make sure to delete as many disgusting noises as possible. So, guys, it has been a journey. Now, this is a journey for everyone, not just people in the European Union, as we kind of expected, but it's now a worldwide journey. For, as we discussed in one of my previous streams, Apple now allows officially retro emulators on the App Store. And in fact, we've already had two, and in the South Park fashion, and they're gone. I think I have to reload the website. Kesha, you're asking where I'm from. I'm streaming from Germany. I'm originally from Moldova in Eastern Europe. So we had an emulator called Bimmy just recently on the App Store, which is a Nintendo Entertainment System emulator. So it's almost as retro as it gets until we get to like the weird 80s consoles. But it was pulled, and this was actually a great emulator from everything that it seemed. It didn't have ads, it didn't have data tracking, so we were all like, what is happening, right? But as it turns out, the developer simply removed it out of fear. He didn't know if he would be getting any consequences from the likes of Nintendo. I hope he will return, because obviously now we have more data. And now he's not alone, which is always better for stuff like lawsuits. But yeah, we were all worried, like, what is happening with Bimmy? And before that, we had iGBA. Now, iGBA had its problems from the get-go. It had ads, it had a ton of data tracking, and it was very obviously stolen code from a guy named Riley Testude, who's been working on iOS, not emulators that emulate iOS, but emulators that work on iOS, for GBA, for Nintendo DS, for NES, SNES, all those old cool systems. And this wasn't obviously the code from this guy, but he still made an ad. He even used all the assets for like the controls that basically gave you like a basic Game Boy and stuff like that. It's not great, honestly. Now, as far as I understand, Ifat's Mind, are you seriously asking what's an emulator? I mean, I can briefly get into it. An emulator basically takes non-native software and makes it compatible on your system without changing the software itself. The later would be a translation layer. That's, for example, what we have on Rosetta, which basically like translates the code for it to be fully compatible compatible going from an x86 Mac to an ARM Apple Silicon Mac. But an emulator tries to, for the most part, recreate the environment in which the original data file would exist, or the original game, the original application. Right? So, for example, if you have a ROM, which is basically the file format it's not the file format, I apologize. It's basically like the old data, the old game file, but the actual file format varies. So I take that back. And you basically insert it into a program that looks and feels to that game or application or whatever like the original system it was designed for. Now, you have to be very careful with that, because it's very easy to obviously just copy and paste code from the original Game Boy, Nintendo DS, and stuff like that, and then put your game file in there. But that is illegal, because that code is obviously intellectual property from Nintendo, from Sony, whoever owns that console, that old PC and stuff like that. So you have to basically like write that code yourself. And if you do that, then your emulator is actually perfectly legally protected. You have to make sure that, for example, you don't really include like firmware from the original system. This is why many emulators require you to download firmware, especially for somewhat newer consoles. Because obviously you cannot just say, oh, Nintendo has like a Switch firmware for me to download from the web. Let me just ingest it into my emulator and make it publicly available and for me to make money from that. So yeah, emulators are basically a way to play applications, games, whatever else you can think of, from a system that isn't your system. Primarily, we usually talk about emulators when we are talking about games and older consoles. But you can obviously try to emulate modern system. If you follow, for example, the Yuzu emulator problems, they try to emulate the Nintendo Switch system, which is obviously a current system, and they got into trouble with Nintendo, not even for the emulation project itself, but for like indirectly advertising the downloads of illegally gotten ROMs, and by advertising functionality with not yet released applications. For example, they were like talking about like, oh, our emulator supports like Zelda Tears of the Kingdom 2 weeks before Tears of the Kingdom is actually available. So that was quite scummy, and that is why they got into problems. But when we are talking about like original Game Boy, and I would say up to Nintendo DS, maybe as far as 3DS, you don't really have those issues. Like even Nintendo shuts down websites that host the ROMs, basically the games, but it does little to nothing against like developers who actually make emulators. So our second emulator, as I said, was a Game Boy emulator that was pulled from the App Store, and we were also originally like, what is happening? Did Apple change their mind? Are we not yet allowed to insert ROMs that we download from the web? No, the problem here was that Apple basically understood the problem, that this was stolen code, and they pulled it from the App Store. This is exactly how the App Store is supposed to behave. This is actually a lot of what gives me like a freedom of mind whenever I use the App Store. I know it's not perfect, and one could argue, oh, it should have never been allowed on the App Store. I would counter that with, how reasonable do you expect like any like App Store like curator to actually know that this is code owned by Riley Testude, the long ass history of GBA for iOS, the Altstore, the Delta emulator? Like, they're not me. I would have obviously seen that if I was paid to like approve or disapprove applications, but they didn't. And so we actually ended up with a saga where, yeah, we got emulators because we got new rules, but both emulators were removed, which is quite crazy. Now, all of this is happening in the backdrop of the Digital Markets app in the European Union. Basically, a giant antitrust derived new array of regulations and rules that forced Apple to allow more kinds of apps on the App Store, which is why we have stuff like emulators. And in fact, Apple made that change not just in the European Union, but worldwide. And this is why today we actually have huge news. And that is that Riley Testude, that guy that I've already mentioned like 20 times, the guy that created GBA for iOS in high school, the Altstore is an alternative marketplace that you could even install without a jailbreak. You can do that even today. And the creator of the Delta emulator, which is a more advanced, obviously, version that has support for more and more retro systems. Well, now we have the Delta game emulator on the App Store with small caveats. The first is it's launching in many countries directly on the App Store for free. First and foremost, of course, the United States is being the biggest market for basically every app out there. But in the European Union, it is a little bit of like a two-sided sword, if one might say that, because we are now getting the Altstore officially, so no need to work like through your email app in the Mac and try to inject some code into iOS and weird things like that. No. You can now download Altstore directly from the web. Unfortunately, and this is where one of the caveats come in, only on iPhone. This does not work on iPad. And once you have the once you have the Altstore, which I'll get to what that looks like, you can download the Delta emulator right now completely for free. The Altstore itself cost it cost me €79, so it's an acceptable price, and I don't blame Riley for asking any money here, because as I've pointed out in my previous videos, without asking money, the core technology fee, which is 50 cents over 1 million downloads of first time installments, could potentially bankrupt developers, right? Because if your app goes surprisingly viral and your income per person downloading is lower than 50 cents, now you're in the red, and that's obviously terrible. So yeah, I just wanted to point out, and Apple is currently working with the European Union on some kind of rule changes for that, because the European Union, by everything that we understand, is not happy with the core technology fee as it's currently written. Regardless, I'm basically jumping from topic to topic. But yeah, you can download the Altstore, but you do have to pay a little bit for it. It's a little bit unfortunate, but I do think that less than €2 a year is a very acceptable price point. Now, right now, you only get the Delta emulator in there, which to me is enough. And you have the Clips app, which is basically a clipboard manager that, unlike the traditional clipboard on iOS that just saves whatever you copied last, on the Clips Manager you can set it to save your last 10 copies or your last 20 copies. So it's quite convenient, but you do have to subscribe to it through Patreon, and that would be at least €1 plus value added tax, which for me was like 19 cents. So I'm now paying €1.19 for this application. I don't know if I will continue paying for it, but I do want to give my support to those guys as much as I can right now. Again, I have actually talked about offering like the Delta emulator on the App Store for like $20, and I would have easily paid that money, but maybe that would have been like some extra problems with the likes of Nintendo. So for now, you do get the Altstore through it in the European Union, obviously you get Delta, but Delta is not exclusive to the European Union, unlike the official version now of the Altstore, right? Delta is available basically everywhere outside the European Union, as far as I understand, which is unfortunate because, and I've already talked about this briefly, the digital markets app rules only apply to the iPhone, not to the iPad. So my trusted iPad Pro here that I'm using to monitor the chat, so feel free to let me know what you think, and if you have any further questions. Unfortunately, I cannot use like my current Altstore subscription and my current Clipboard subscription to download those apps, to download Delta and Clips on my iPad. This is where I really wanted to make a small appeal to Riley and whatever other developer wants to publish alternative marketplaces. Please make as many apps like the taboo apps, right? The apps that might be completely forbidden on the App Store. I fully understand. Keep those on your alternative marketplace. But if you can actually publish on the App Store, please do so, and please also do so in the European Union, because there is a core value for iOS when it comes to simplicity and like just the way we are used to using our devices. And I know that many more people will actually give your phenomenal Delta emulator a chance if you also put it on the App Store. I know you're also now looking at ways to monetize it a little more, which obviously in the European Union works now a little differently, but I really highly encourage you. It goes out to Riley, it goes out to any kind of developer who's currently working on their own alternative marketplace. If you have an app that can be allowed on the App Store, please consider publish on the App Store as well. It helps with the iPad, and the iPad is a huge part of the user experience for many people. This is why I've talked about how the digital markets app is actually very incomplete. I have no idea. Well, I can sort of legally understand, but not functionally, why they didn't include the iPad just in the overall discussion. They could have easily said that a lot of the iPad success bleeds over from the iPhone, and it makes no functional sense to treat those operating systems differently. I think there would have been a very good point about that. Regardless, so we now have basically two phenomenal solutions, but one is a little bit less convenient if you are in the European Union. However, one is much more potentially broader functioning if you are in the European Union, because obviously the Altstore itself will not just be a host for the Delta emulator, but for all kinds of applications that either right now go against Apple's rules or used to go against Apple's rules and now are technically allowed. So there's a lot to look forward to. Now, what do you actually get, right? Well, if you are in the European Union and you basically click on Get Altstore, and then you click, right, it's €1.50 plus value-added tax, right? Value-added tax will depend a little bit on where exactly you are. Again, for me, 19%. And you click on it. I'll actually choose not to show it because I think it might suggest my credit card, but it basically just opens up a payment processing window. And then from there, I would recommend just using your Apple Pay. It just offers you a download button. It's extremely easy. And if we actually look at Zollotag, because I was too stupid to take screenshots while downloading it, I was too excited. Maybe I should do it a little later on. So you basically get the alternative marketplaces included in your settings app. It's under app installation, and you actually get a lot of functionality here, or basically like settings that mirror what you can configure for the App Store itself. Basically things like app updates, in-app content management, automatic downloads, app downloads based on like how big the data is, and then you can regulate it if it should just be happening on like the 5G or Wi-Fi. You can offload unused apps. I'll make this all a little bit bigger. You can offload unused apps, which is also a function of regular iOS in general. And then default marketplace will be the App Store, but now, and I recommend keeping it as the App Store, but now you can download alternatives ones like the Altstore. You have to allow once basically the developer so you basically, at least that was the case for me, you have to click the download button twice, because you click it once and then you go into settings, and then right at the top where like sometimes your AirPods menu is, there will be like this and this developer basically wants this and this access, and then the second time you then click and then you confirm it, and then the second time you click download on the Altstore website, then you get like a proper download. Now the first time I clicked on the second download button, it bugged out and it didn't download it actually, but it seemed to be a problem with the website, not with actual iOS, because it seems like just the download itself was a little broken, which is kind of understandable. I am in iOS 17.5 beta 2, so maybe some of that stuff will be a little bit unstable. Maybe the first version of like the new Altstore website is a little bit less stable, but otherwise it worked completely fine. I got a huge pop-up window that showed me basically like it explained to me alternative marketplaces. It wasn't very scary. I know the European Union is currently thinking about like dictating the text that Apple can tell people. I can just tell you it's not that frightening, it's not that bad. I actually really want Apple to scare people a little bit, not so much that they frighten people away from downloading stuff through the web, through alternative marketplaces, but we have been like since 2008 with one app store. Changing that paradigm entirely should come with a sufficient amount of warning, in my opinion. So, and basically you manage then the Altstore itself like you would do any kind of application. You can find it in your settings app. You can give it permissions for stuff like background app refresh, notifications, Siri and search. As for all alternative marketplaces, there's a new setting to show install confirmations. It says display ad details and confirm installation when installing apps from the Altstore, which basically it makes sure that if for some reason an alternative marketplace is like maybe not that trustworthy, you still have as much oversight as you basically would from the App Store. You just don't have the kind of protections that people usually associate with the App Store. Guys, we have more people watching than for a while. I just wanted to say thank you so much. Please comment, let me know what you think, let me know what else you would like to hear me talk about. Please, if you're enjoying the channel in general, subscribe, like, share, and if you feel like supporting me directly, please consider sending live a small super chat or super sticker donation. And if you want to support this channel in the long run, you'll find my Patreon link in the description of this channel. So there's basically, if you're saying Apple should upgrade Siri, you can actually find videos on my channel where I talk about like the rumored iOS 18 features and stuff like that, and we'll be talking a lot more about like improved Siri, Apple AI, upgraded neural engines, and like the A18 and the M4 chips down the road as we get more and more confirmation, more and more official data. And then there's the default app marketplace setting, basically, where you can choose which one is your standard. Now, given obviously the abundance of applications on the App Store, given that it's vetted and stuff like that, I highly recommend keeping the App Store your default. But it's cool that there is even a setting like this, because we obviously know Apple doesn't like to give us too much like default app control. It took us a while for us to get any kind of defaults, for example, for stuff like browsers. But yeah, this has been mandated by the European Union. I think some of the stuff that we see, including what I mentioned about like the original text that you get for what you download, and the potential dangers of alternative marketplaces, I think some of that will be subject to change, but in my opinion, the first implementation from Apple is kind of cool and good. So yeah, basically, if you also want to support, if you want to support the Altstore guys directly, you can also do that over Patreon. I have no problems recommending that. They've been trustworthy for like a decade or more. So there's absolutely no fear here of supporting them, but obviously just downloading the Altstore, now that it costs a little bit of money, €1.50 plus value added tax, that of course also supports them. And down the road, they also plan on having more self-published apps. Basically, they do self-publishing already, but they will be hosting more developers on here, more apps. They will become their own like more sophisticated app store, but they're starting with Riley stuff, Delta and Clip. And I actually wanted to go a little more into Delta just so you know how good it is, because quite honestly, I just love giving out shout outs to people who are putting in amazing work. In terms of supported game systems, this is actually a doozy for like an iOS application. It supports the NES, the SNES, the Nintendo 64, which I didn't even know. It supports the Game Boy and Game Boy Color. As you know, the Game Boy Color was basically a refresh of the original Game Boy, because the original Game Boy was so successful they didn't make a full-on sequel to it for a while, and this is why the Game Boy Color exists. Then there came the Game Boy Advance, which is a very, very cool system that I didn't even have in my childhood, but I've had a lot of Game Boy Advance apps that I played on my Nintendo DS, which was my first gaming system, which I believe both dates me in both positive and negative ways, depending on how old you are if you're watching this. And he even says there's plenty more to come, so I'm excited for that as well. We actually have some news right now that like a PlayStation Portable emulator developer is pledging to make their emulator available on the App Store, or publish it in some kind of way. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. In terms of controller support, this is where I actually am super, super duper excited, because yes, it supports all the current like game controllers, including my beloved DualSense from my PS5. It has like save stats, supports cheats. It's basically a super duper comprehensive emulator. It works really, really well. It is really, really efficient. Even if you set it on like fast forward, it really doesn't eat too much into battery. I say that because I know I have used it in the past. And it's probably gotten only better in the meantime. So really, really fantastic stuff. Absolutely worth, in my opinion, the money in the European Union. But if you are not in the European Union, then yes, it's currently free, which is an absolute steal. And I just wanted to like give the shout out that it's deserved here. Basically, there's not much more here about Altstore as well. It's very important to don't harass them for asking money. Not only do they deserve money in general, but they don't have an alternative because of the core technology fee. So be always fair to developers, always question why are certain decisions the way they are, right? And don't be afraid, I would say, even once the pop-up window comes up and tells you that Apple cannot guarantee you the same kind of like security and privacy on an alternative marketplace as they can on the App Store. These guys are legit, and these guys do deserve your support. So there's absolutely like no hesitation for me here to call this out as an amazing solution. As I said, there are some downsides which primarily are all about the fact that obviously the European Union does not get a free Delta emulator, but then the US and other countries don't get like the full Altstore and other applications it hosts right now, which for now is only clips beyond Delta, and all the applications it will host. But there's also the problem of the iPad for the European Union, which is if you are an iPad user, because the iPad is not included in the regulations for the Digital Markets app, you unfortunately cannot download the Altstore. You unfortunately therefore cannot download Delta, which is quite a shame, because obviously if you are like on an Apple Silicon iPad Pro M1, M2, you really get a lot of performance. You can go to like crazy fast forwards levels and still have like a super duper stable game playback. It's really, really fun that way to like cheat stuff in the games. That's one of the downsides, but hey, it's still a hell of a lot better than when we had like Bimmy get yeeted out of the App Store by the developer itself. So this was not actually Apple. It's definitely better than when iGBA was removed, and for good reason, because we now have its better version, even the successor to the code that was stolen for iGBA, which is GBA for iOS. GBA for iOS is a part of Delta. Obviously, that is very, very much like a step upwards. And as far as I know, there's no ads, no egregious data collection and stuff like that. So there's a lot to look forward to if you're using this application, whether you are downloading it from the App Store or whether you're downloading it from the Altstore. That basically is the biggest news of today. I don't think we have that much more that I could cover. I don't even know like how much time explicitly I have. For anybody who is still there, which the number has come down a little bit, please let me know. Is there something else you would like to see me cover? Did something recently pop up that really interests you? And of course, if it's something that also interests me, I'll gladly respond to it, answer questions, and I would like to provide and react to something if there's actually something interesting to react to. Beyond just what we have in terms of Apple news since I last have been online, there has been a second beta published of macOS 14.5, iOS 17.5, of Vision OS, and basically all the major Apple operating systems. I can confirm that it's quite a stable release, at least for me on my Mac, on my Apple TV, on my Apple Watch. So obviously you guys would probably go to somebody like Zollotech for beta reviews, so this is why I don't usually cover them. It's a market that is very well covered by very respected people, so I don't usually get too involved into this unless there's something big that changes. You have asked if Apple should upgrade Siri. Now, we don't actually know how much better Siri itself will be, because the rumors that at least Mark Gurman has provided thus far really point towards that Apple's their own ChatGPT solution might not be in iOS 18, at least not right away. like when it comes to an actually something that you talk to and it talks back with like a ton of data from the web and it does summaries, there is a chance that it could be a little bit like when you choose search engines, right? Where you choose like ChatGPT or you choose like Google Gemini as a backdrop, and then it does the search for you, and it does also the analysis. While a lot of what Apple will do themselves in the AI space will primarily be focused on local AI. So, and we actually have like an Apple Insider rumor here that is very interesting because it's about iOS 18 adding new features to the Notes app which relate to voice memos and mathematics. First, the report claims that iOS 18 will allow iPhone users to record voice memos directly within the Notes app. So that's not very much like an AI feature or something like that. And these recordings could then be embedded in Notes. Audio recordings can already be copied and pasted from the voice memos in the Notes app. So it's not really a big change. It just makes it more convenient. And there is also a part of the report that says that the Notes app will likely gain support for displaying mathematical notation on iOS 18. Now, we don't know if Apple will go further with stuff like AI maybe in the calculator app and things like that. There's also been rumors that Apple would have like writing assistant for you. Again, we don't know if they're like fully local or if they're like based on Apple's own like large language models, or if they're exclusively powered by ChatGPT or Google Gemini or Weibo or whatever. So, but apps like the Notes app, like Pages, like Keynotes, like Numbers, they all stand to benefit a lot from AI. And you can see that basically like there's a lot of small tidbits that we're getting, and we don't always know if this has anything to do with like the bigger redesigns, because iOS 18 is like rumored to get like new app icons, small changes, like some changes to the home screen layout and stuff like that. macOS 15 is like rumored to get a redesigned calculator app, and we don't always know which of the rumors pertain to stuff like an improved Siri, an improved like AI in the system. We don't know which features might be like exclusive for like the A17 Pro, the M3, M4 chip, maybe even a 18 chip. So we don't know, but we are getting a lot more tidbits for how big of a change iOS 18 will be. And according to Mark Gurman, iOS 18 will be the biggest update, or at least it's internally believed by Apple employees to be the biggest iOS update ever. I don't know if they consider it bigger than iOS 7 with its redesign, its control center and stuff like that, the way it brought more functionality to background app refresh. But yeah, it seems to be like at least the biggest update since then. And maybe if you really go into detail, maybe it's even bigger than iOS 7 itself was a decade ago. Yeah, there isn't that much like Vision OS. There are some issues right now. It seems like new app publishing has fallen down the cliff a little bit. It seems like developers are not as interested in this system as they were at launch. Let's see if that changes once Apple launches Vision Pro in like the European Union and the UK, China, things like that. But at least we got like a new native Microsoft OneNote app. I always want to give a shout out to Microsoft, which, as terrible as they sometimes are, and with how much they want to like switch everything to web apps and stuff like that, it seems like whenever they cooperate with Apple, for example, like when they launched like more advanced version of like their Office suite for the 2015 iPad Pro, which was Apple's first like 12.9-inch iPad Pro, they actually make pretty fantastic applications. They're very efficient, relatively lightweight, pretty performant, and it seems like there's now a native Microsoft OneNote app available for Apple Vision Pro. So at least some support for Vision Pro is on the way. But it's Microsoft, so you always have to take all like praise with a grain of salt, because they usually come around from the back and then undo a lot of the goodwill. Now, VisionOS in general, I don't cover it much, not because I'm not interested, but because honestly there's not that much excitement in the community to cover it. But we have like spatial personas now that flow basically outside like your regular FaceTime window, and you can just put them everywhere you want with you. With that, persona quality has also improved in like the Vision 1.1, and now we're getting Vision OS 1.2, so we will see how much it improves from there. But this is why I always say, like, it's one thing to like talk about like the MKBHD motto of like, right, don't buy software or hardware with the hope that it gets better in the future. But with Apple, you kind of cannot ignore the potential of future updates, because Apple is so unique in how long their like support is for their devices, just what a multitude of apps and features they themselves obviously maintain and upgrade, even from like Pages keynoted numbers, for example, being like somewhat neglected. There are still like fantastic basic like Word and like PowerPoint like processors, and so I just wanted to say, like, if you thought of Vision Pro, oh, I will not get it because I think personas will always look weird. Well, just a couple of months later, they already don't look nearly as weird. I would argue they never looked that weird unless you have like really long hair. But yeah, Vision OS is improving, Vision Pro is improving. Basically, there's a lot to be excited about in the world of Apple, I would argue. Oh, by the way, I just saw that I didn't connect my iPhone to it still has 39% battery. That's good because I don't want to run out of battery for the iPhone midstream. That would be a kind of very embarrassing tech problem to have. So this has been like a very like brief overview of like the rumors and leaks that we've also gotten. Again, I have been going back to like more regular videos, so I didn't miss that much. You can discuss some extra stuff, like basically what does Apple have planned for the M4 family. For example, MaxTech put out a video yesterday on it. However, I will cover more on this down the road. But for now, I do think I want to let this end. I want to make this like, it's not a standalone video. It will be still like a live stream on my channel. But I do think it's shorter than most of my videos. I think that makes it a little bit more easy to digest. I will also give you timestamps in the video later on. So the first thing will basically cover the Altstore and the Delta emulator. There's no way to really like take one away from the other, and then I will label that at the end. You get a small overview of like leaks and rumors that I haven't covered yet. And of course, whenever there's something new, you can bet that I'll be there to cover it as long as I have the time. And as I promised, I do have a little bit more time now. So this is basically me wrapping up, me saying thank you for quite a high like peak viewership, but as always, feel free to subscribe, like, share, comment, do all the YouTube jazz, as I call it, so that help me out with the algorithm, help us get to 100K. And if you want to support this channel directly, if you catch me live, please consider sending a small super chat or a super sticker. And if you want to support this channel directly in like perpetuity, or at least for a continued amount of time, you can find my Patreon link in the description of this channel. And just by the way, I'm toning down my Twitter engagement a little bit because I'm just so sick of how bad that platform has become. Maybe I'll mention a little bit more about that when I do like a longer stream on the weekend. But you can still obviously catch me on Twitter. I'm not deleting my account. I will still be responding to like direct messages. I know a lot of you like to connect with me on Twitter via direct messages and stuff like that. But you can find the link to my Twitter in the description of this channel. Yeah, that basically summarizes it. It's a lot of good news, a lot of stuff where I've historically said that like the Delta game emulator like by itself should have been like on the App Store years and years ago, but emulator apps in general, because they are deemed 100% legal if the code is not stolen, and if as long as the developer doesn't like host ROMs that are stolen, then I think that emulators should be 100% permitted, except for maybe like the latest system. Like for example, if somebody tried to post a Nintendo Switch emulator on the App Store, I would disagree with that, and I think Nintendo would heavily disagree with that. And I think even like a Nintendo 3DS emulator, it's still a little questionable if that would like qualify as a retro game system. But I think PS3 and downwards, original Xbox and Xbox 360 and downwards, Nintendo DS and downwards, and for Nintendo home consoles that would be, yeah, I think that a Wii emulator is absolutely fine as well. Probably even a Wii U, even though it's relatively recent, it's so irrelevant in the broader market. I don't know if even Nintendo would care that much. They have ported most of the games to the Switch anyway. The Switch is insanely successful, and Wii U emulators have existed through all this time, and nobody bothered to like not buy a Switch because there were Wii U emulators out there. Alternative marketplaces, I have talked about how there are positives and negatives. In fact, I have covered some of the negatives whenever it comes to like compliance with a specific legislation, because even the best legislation will have like some gaps, some limitations, and we see that, for example, with the Digital Markets app, because by it not covering like the iPad, it's only for the iPhone. But I mean, it's better to have it than not have it, I guess, if you are a tinkerer. You can also see some of the downside with an app like Delta Emulator being published to the regular App Store outside the European Union, but then only being available on the Altstore in the European Union. So while the European Union app made it like so that we are protected here in Europe, it also made us now pay more than people in America and other regions. So there's always some back and forth, always some pros and cons. I have always argued more, and you can check out my older videos on that when the DMA originally launched. I have said that it's good that they're mandating certain apps be allowed. In fact, I have talked about an independent committee for years, something that maybe comes together twice a year and talks about what guidelines for the App Store are still up to date, which ones need to change, which ones might be in non-compliance with current legislations, which ones are objectively in non-compliance with new legislation, and which ones just hurt Apple's image because they sort of cross developers that way. And I think that Apple needs a PRW from developers. There's been a lot of backlash. I doubt that they will will be like any boycotts or anything, but having rule changes that now allow cloud gaming apps. And by the way, I do want to really briefly mention that, right? Cloud gaming, Microsoft, iOS. I just want to, like, because I praised Microsoft in this video, right? Here, Mac Rumors is doing a lot of heavy lifting for us today, guys. Give them a big shout out. Because the European Union basically forced Apple to allow cloud gaming apps, Apple actually went further and did also make that change worldwide, basically, right? So if Microsoft wanted to, they absolutely could publish a proper XCloud gaming app. And they said nope. And this is where I hate Microsoft and their absolute hypocrisy to stuff like alternative marketplaces. They talk big. They even said like, oh, we might bring alternative marketplaces to Xbox. They say a lot of bullshit about how open Windows is, but then like the Edge browser tries to actively prevent you from like using other browsers and stuff like that. So if you believe, by the way, that it's always just Apple in the way, think again. Plenty of times developers, you will like give them a hand and they will try to take the entire arm. And I'm not talking about guys like Riley. I understand why Riley did what he did in the discrepancy between like Delta being available on the App Store worldwide and only being on the Altstore in the European Union. Microsoft is not like strapped for cash. Microsoft does have an existing developer account, and they're saying like, yeah, we are not putting in a cloud gaming app on the App Store, even though it's allowed, because we don't have like a way to monetize it, which is, by the way, also not true, because most of the people who even have like XCloud will most likely be coming from a Windows PC or an Xbox, where they've or they will do the thing that everybody does on like Spotify and stuff like that, where you just subscribe to the web through the web, and then you access your account on the app. But yeah, Microsoft can be really dishonest. So can the Spotify guys. I'm not saying that to defend Apple. As I've said time and time again, I think there are things that Apple does wrong, and I like to see them rectified. Like to see people like Riley get the respect that they deserve for the work that they've put in, even though there's been like I remember like 5 or 6 years ago, and I was talking to some friends about like, or even longer ago than that, and I was like, and we were talking about stuff like emulators and iOS, and people were like, look, Riley does this and that. I'm like, yeah, but like, what does he expect from this, right, down the road? Will Apple ever change? And yeah, Apple changed, and I hope that he gets as much money as he can, gets a lot of recognition from this, and can make the Altstore even bigger and more important. It's very likely that countries like Japan will soon follow the European Union in similar regulations. So there's a lot of chance here to branch out. I think the United States will probably in a couple of years, especially if we get like a fully democratic government in the next election across the Congress and Senate, I think there's a good chance that we would see somewhat DMA adjacent legislation there as well. And then things like that could obviously be even huger than they already are. Mighty, you're saying you're from the European Union. Do you know if you can add existing custom sources to Altstore? As far as you mean, like you would do with like Cydia from like when you jailbreak like your device? I don't. As far as I know, there's only for now clips in there, and you have like your own source would be stuff like your Patreon stuff, but they have to like have some kind of agreement with the Altstore guys. Rio, you're also saying hello. A lot of new people. I tried to wrap up like 10 minutes ago, but I do really want to say hi to all the new faces. Did you know that Delta is on the App Store now? Yeah, I have covered it obviously extensively here. My main point of just criticism for Delta on the App Store is that it's not in the European Union. In the European Union, you have to go through the Altstore, while you can get it in other regions just through the App Store. You mean trusted sources from Altstore? That I do not know. I honestly do not. Or wait, do you know if you can add existing custom sources? No, as far as I know, there's no such functionality like that, because you have to understand that the alternative marketplaces right now are responsible for the stuff they host. Now you can offer a lot of stuff on there that you cannot do on the App Store. Now previously I would have mentioned emulators, but now they're on the App Store as well. But you can even offer like adult apps and stuff like that. But as far as I know, like Apple needs to like see that the store does at least like some vetting, as far as I understand. So it cannot just be a repository basically that lets you download anything you want. Maybe that would change, but yeah, as far as I know, the Altstore is its own marketplace right now, where you go in, you see what's available. For some stuff you might pay directly, for some stuff you might subscribe to Patreon, but yeah, it's basically now a real App Store alternative. It's not a way to just sideload onto your device, right? Even on their website, and conveniently I'm right there, they're saying it's a new way to sideload. So it's basically different from how like you previously worked around like the email app on your Mac and stuff like that. No, this is very much like they're registered with Apple. I will let you know. Wait, what? Browse apps from China? Wait, but they do mention, this is my problem here, Multi here. Please feel free to correct me, because they're saying you can add additional sources to further increase your options, but I don't yet see that. Because they do have the sources here. Did I miss that? Because I don't want to say anything wrong. If I just said something wrong, then I would like for you guys to basically like correct me. Because I did not know that they are replicating this functionality with this new here, trusted sources. Trusted sources are sources that have been reviewed to make sure that they meet our safety standards. Support for adding untrusted sources is currently in beta. You guys have to let me know. Somebody who might be doing a lot of Altstore stuff, because I haven't used Altstore for like 2 years now. Is that, like, for example, Dolphin iOS, which I believe would be like the way to like I think I'll just buy the subscription for $1 and try it out tomorrow. Yeah, I think that's a fair thing. It's just that, you know what? I'll just do a small switcheroo here, which is like a video capture device. And I'll just give you my FaceTime HD camera for now. You can see, by the way, here briefly how much worse the FaceTime HD camera is than my iPhone camera. And I'll delete my I believe this is my iPhone. Yeah. So I'll just briefly, you know what, Multi, because I want to do right by you, because you've asked a very good question here. And I'll just go to the Altstore here on my iPhone. And then we'll see. There's actually a sources button. What are sources? Sources determine what apps are available in Altstore. The more sources you add, the better your Altstore experience will be. And you know what we'll actually do with that is we'll actually Video capture device, I believe. Device, marks iPhone. I don't know if I can like stream my actual iPhone to this unless I'm connected via cable, and I don't have an extra USB-C cable right here. But yeah, you can actually see if I do extra sources, recommended sources coming soon, add sources, and you know what? I'll just like oatmeals, and I'll just copy this, and then it should be on my iPhone. And wait, it says it's an unsupported DLL. One or more apps in source oatmeal domes also source are missing a marketplace ID. This most likely means they are not notarized, which is not supported by this version of Altstore. Yeah, I actually like. Yes, this is a really, really good idea. Mark's MacBook Pro. Multi, together we're solving everything. I hope that everything still works. But yeah, basically I took the stuff. Basically, you can look here at the regular Altstore layout. So basically, my first instinct was correct, but then I kind of like I think I weirded myself out a little bit by thinking too much about it, right? So you see the Altstore, you can browse the stuff here, right? So it's basically as you would expect. And then if you go to sources, right, you'll find that they explain briefly what sources are here. This is how I remember Altstore being from the past. But here is like enter a URL, which is kind of like a repository for Cydia, right? And what is happening, because the link is just a little broken the way I copied it, right? This would be with the Dolphin emulator. This is how you would add it to the Altstore. And you add it, and then this comes up. So this is actually fantastic that you call that out, Multi. Now I know a lot more. This is, by the way, guys, why I love doing live streams, is because I'm learning with you, and I want to be the most informed I can be for you guys. And you can see that they say one or more apps in source oatmeal domes Altstore source are missing a marketplace ID. So my first idea here was actually correct. They cannot just serve you stuff that has zero like verification. They themselves need to be at least in some way accountable for that app. Now that doesn't actually mean that they cannot host apps without like basically just rubber stamping them. But this would basically be full-on site loading on iOS, and Apple wants to prevent it. Yeah, you have to kind of understand, right? By putting in a URL, and then basically you get like to download whatever is behind that URL. This is basically full-on site loading, and at that point, the Altstore would be like, especially by supporting unsupported, like unofficial extra sources, then they would just be a complete site loading like middleman a little bit, right? So it says that they're most likely not notarized, which developers have to be. Now, this notarization is not that difficult for, on like iOS, like with the new DMA laws, but you do have to basically be like a real person with some kind of like a payment processing ability and stuff like that. You cannot be like a known scammer and things like that. And as far as I know, you cannot be just publishing completely like stolen data. Otherwise, you're very, very open. As I said, even like adult apps will be allowed and stuff like that. But yeah, you just cannot be a full-on like site loading solution. And as they're saying, this is not supported by this version of Altstore. So if you actually have that other version of Altstore, which is like the one that needs more workarounds, there this stuff would go. But obviously now you cannot just download it through the web the way I did, and the way that, and if you pay if you have the official version, this is unfortunately not something that currently works. Multi, thank you very, very much for enlightening me, because I haven't used Altstore, like the site-loaded version, for quite a while. So yeah, this basically, once I got my M1 Max MacBook Pro, I had far less need of like having emulators on my iPad and things like that. This is when I really stopped using Altstore. And yeah, I hope that everything still works on my screen. I apologize. Obviously my camera quality is greatly degraded, but because I'm using the FaceTime HD camera and not my iPhone 15 Pro Max camera anymore. But it is time to wrap up anyway. As I've said now time and time again, I appreciate all your support. As you have just seen live, we are all learning, we are all evolving. And I really therefore appreciate whenever you can come live, please do so, because it helps the channel tremendously. It teaches me a lot. It gives you opportunities to both teach me and like learn from me if I happen to know something more. And beyond that, I just love the free flow interaction. I love how we can all enlighten each other a little bit. So I will be doing a stream probably on Friday and then probably sometime during the weekend. I really look forward to how all of this evolves. Maybe very soon we'll be getting other alternative marketplaces. We might get like we might get at any time, like I want to say the Fortnite store, but it's the Epic Games store, because they were really clamoring for their store to be like the next big thing, which it never became on Windows, but let's give them a chance on iOS, I guess. Yeah, beyond that, as always, I look forward to your suggestions and your comments, what I should cover next. Please let me know if there's anything you would like to see improved. Now, there are some small things that will improve in the near future. I'll let you know once those things actually happen live, because I cannot guarantee the timeline on those things. And as I've said before, consider doing all the YouTube jazz: liking, subscribing, sharing, commenting. First and foremost, subscribing to get us to the 100K. Of course, if you are like really big fan of my content, if you catch me live, send me a super chat or a super sticker for some small direct support. And if you want to support me in the long run, then of course there's stuff like my Patreon account, which you can find in the link in the description of this channel. Thank you guys so much. We had plenty of people watching, commenting. This is how I love making videos. I know that live streaming is not really it doesn't really fit technology the way that like a pre-made video does, but it is really what I enjoy, and this is my hobby. I do this on the side while I'm finishing med school, so I appreciate every viewer, every subscriber, every commenter. I love you guys so much. Appreciate all feedback, both constructive and maybe some a little bit less so. I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you so much again. This is Mark Tech, tuning out.